Welcome to another episode of the Meter Cute interviews here on Meter and Mayhem. Today I'll be chatting with Rebecca Cuthbert, who writes dark fiction and poetry. Her debut poetry collection, In Memory of Exoskeletons, is available from Alien Buddha Press, and her craft text and memoir, Creep This Way, How to Become a Horror Writer with 24 Tips to Get You Ghouling, is out now from Seamus and Nunzio Productions. You can look for a hybrid collection, Self-Made Monsters, this fall, also from Alien Buddha. She's going to give us a little taste of all three books during her reading. So sit back, relax, and get ready to fall in love.
Hi, everybody. I am Rebecca. I want to say thank you to Jen for inviting me on the show. And I'm going to start my reading tonight not with a poem I wrote, but with reading about writing poetry from my new book, which is called Creep This Way, How to Become a Horror Writer with 24 Tips to Get You Ghouling. My publisher and I are both into puns, and we will not apologize for the subtitle. So I'm going to read from a chapter called Dare to Write in Other Genres, because I am not really a poet first. I'm a fiction writer first. And I ended up more or less falling into poetry, almost despite my reservations. So I will tell you about that. I used to shy away from other genres, especially poetry. I had a prejudiced opinion of the word poet, associating with it flaky, draining people, much too caught up in gazing at their own belly buttons. I have met poets like that, but I have learned they aren't the majority. Then 5 or 6 years ago, I started dabbling. I didn't have time to write and endlessly revise a 5,000-word story, but I had time to write a poem. And the first draft of the first one, of course, wasn't very good. However, I found I had time to revise that poem, then revise it again, then a few more times. I had faculty office hours scheduled on Friday afternoons, and no college student with an ounce of self-respect was coming to talk about writing with their teacher on a Friday afternoon, so that became my poetry hour. Some of those Friday afternoon poems got published in journals and eventually made it into my 2023 collection In Memory of Exoskeletons, like Afternoon 1988, Heirloom, Bargain, and others. And here's the thing with getting published. It feels good, it's nice, and it has a way of making a person think, oh, hey, maybe I'm kind of okay at this. Maybe I like it. I still don't consider myself a poet, but I concede that I write poetry. These days, I'm still writing poetry, and it's still not exclusive. I'm a fiction writer first, but poems, like microfiction, can be great in-between accomplishments for when I need a break from a larger project, especially if I'm feeling frustrated by it or I'm not sure how to address an issue I see. Writing a poem is like a side quest, something I can achieve and route to a bigger goal. And because I don't have to worry about things like plot, backstory, the role of secondary characters, the protagonist arc, etc., I can revise a poem in a reasonable time frame. And that means I have a whole new polished word baby to send out into the world. It gives me a confidence boost and a bit of energy so I can go back to my larger work in progress with a fresh perspective. Another reason I recommend fiction writers play around with poetry and microfiction is because in poetry, every single word counts. Not just every sentence, every word. I will agonize, okay, not really, but almost, over the choice between murk and gloom, because they are different. Because there is no such thing as an exact synonym, because every word carries its own shade of meaning, and it's not just every word, it's every piece of punctuation. I'm going to stop there with that, and I'm going to go to that collection In Memory of Exoskeletons. This one is not very pretty looking because it's full of my Post-it notes. And it has so many Post-it notes that I don't necessarily know what the Post-it notes mean anymore, but that's all right. The poem I want to read from this one is called Bargain. Feeling deciduous, brackish woods bracken and fever closing in, you search for breadcrumbs I promised to leave, weighting your apron with pebbles instead. It hangs from your hips like the burden you are. Gravity has never owed anyone favors. 3 owl hoots echo. They're less like who and more like you. Didn't you ask me who's to blame? Didn't I send you for rye meal and ashes? Watch for fault lines. My jacket is lined with mouse hair. There's a blackbird pie in the airing cupboard, a heap of small sneakers by the backyard door. Can you smell the smoke on the stirring breeze? Inhale like you mean it. Call the dogs, bring the torches. When my eyelids are packed with sand, my throat stopped up, our secrets buried in a brown glass bottle beneath these twisted roots, whom will you call on to save you, to boil you, to know your quietest name? Okay, I'm gonna do one more. This one is from my upcoming hybrid collection. It's called Self-Made Monsters, and it will be out from Alien Buddha Press in the fall, in October of 24. So this one is called Lake Erie Omen. I live by Lake Erie, by the way. You call me an omen, good or ill, but I have a name and it's not Bessie, that tourist's barb, that cheap shot glass logo. But how could you landlocked brutes understand, you with your broken scavenger's tongue, mine, deep-toned chantings from nightmares long since dreamt? Do you know what I've done with your zebra muscles? Did you think their weak shells could colonize me too? Foolish men, I wear them like jewels, like the crown I've surely earned. For who else would spend eons ruling over this lake bed, doling out petty fates for lesser monsters like you? Don't think I do not mark you, always. Standing on the shore, pretending not to see me, stupid driftwood doesn't blink. You know the lore. To spy me with dry feet on sand foretells a death by water. It may be a drowning or something with more flair. Your neck caught in a coil of rope, a slippery deck, and a step misplaced. But if, as they say, you're lost in a storm, flimsy boat tossed like litter, like the floating trash you are, I might afford you pity, me, your queen of scale and bone. I'll stop there. Thank you.
I have so many thoughts in my head right now. Your queen of scale and bone, that was beautiful. That
Thank
was
you.
like, what a hell of a landing, right? On the end of that poem.
Thanks.
That was great. And I remembered when you were reading from the Creep This Way book, I remembered why I turn off my camera and my mic when folks are reading, because I was laughing so hard. People would not have been able to hear your reading if I had had those on. So thank you for that delightful ride from humor to the sublime there with that ending poem. That was great.
Thank you.
So speaking of things that are great, who is a metrical poet that you're in love with? What do you think is great?
So I want to, I'm not going with like a contemporary poet. I'm going to go with Edna St. Vincent Millay. So, you know, we can call her modern. She was like super big in the 20s. She died in 1950. She was part of the wave of like feminist poets who, I don't know if this was a thought in her head, and I don't want to like put words in her mouth, but we're sort of like anti-pretension. Like there's something like really refreshing about her work because she does work with meter and she does work with rhyme, but she's one of the poets who made me stop hating rhyme. Like I sort of hated rhyme. Like I was kind of like over the whole like Shakespearean rhyme and like forcing awkward syntax, you know, so that you would get like the end rhyme. Like I can't stand that. And so I thought like I didn't like rhyme, but I just didn't like super old, hundreds of years old white man poetry, you know? I was like, and then so when I got into like the more modern poets, which of course was not until college, because in high school, like you only do sort of the Shakespeare stuff. And I just I love her sassiness. I love that um, there's something about her word choice where like they are they're sort of plain spoken words, but they're still really beautiful. Like she shows that it's not just the word, it's the combination of words that makes them special. And I think that that is really important for poetry. Um, and I just think like she comes up with kind of like she sort of coins her own words, or she uses like hyphenated words, but they're not what you would expect. And I just I always like want to like pump my fist when I hear her poems. Like there's something that really like riles me up about them in a good way. So she is my choice. She's my pick for that.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Um, is there a particular poem of hers that you love kind of above all others that you feel really shows off that kind of thing that you're talking about with the rhyme?
I do, and it also has the advantage of being kind of a horror poem, I think. Like it's got a bit of I'm gonna call sea witch flair to it that I really enjoy. Like I read this and I was like, ooh, it's even in the title. So it's I shall go back again to the bleak shore. And
Ooh.
so it's like right away you're like, that's a sea witch. So and it is not long at all. So here I go. I shall go back again to the bleak shore and build a little shanty on the sand in such a way that the extremest band of brittle seaweed will escape my door but by a yard or two. And never more shall I return to take you by the hand. I shall be gone to what I understand and happier than I ever was before. The love that stood a moment in your eyes, the words that lay a moment on your tongue, are one with all that in a moment dies, a little undersaid and oversung. But I shall find the sullen rocks and skies unchanged from what they were when I was young. I just That's such a good poem.
Yeah.
And it's so feminist, right? Because it's like I had something really good before you and I'm just going to go back to it. Like I wasn't half a person before you and I'm not half a person after you. And I think that that is pretty badass.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and especially the time period that she's writing in to come out and say that. I like that.
Hmm. And she has like a lot of great poems, and there's not the same, but there's like sort of a similar sentiment to a lot of them. That's just this sort of like I don't need you attitude that I really appreciate, and I think that's how love should be. Like it should be want, not need. Um, and so I, even as a person in like a happy marriage, I still appreciate what she has to say about it.
Yeah. And that has okay, this is um it's like the ending of Rumor Has It. Do you remember that movie with Jennifer Aniston?
No.
Okay. There's, yeah, spoiler alert on a like almost 20-year-old movie
20
or
year old movie.
yeah, that her boyfriend or husband or whatever, when they're sort of reconciling, um, and he's like, I don't want you to need me, I want you to want me. And so that makes me think of that movie.
Yeah.
Um, maybe the writers were big Millay fans. You
That
don't
would be cool if they were.
know.
That's giving them a lot of credit, but they may have been.
Right? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it is. Have you seen the calls for I'm trying to think of the right term. I think I think they're calling it a residency. They might be calling it a fellowship, but that there's like a 1 month residency, Edna St. Vincent Millay, like Edna St. Vincent Millay colony or house or something, um, the applications are due by, I think, like early April 2024, if in case anybody's watching this down the road.
Well, I have heard of, but now I'm like, well, should I actually do one? So now that you're like, they're due soon. It's like they're due soon, but not yet. I got time.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw somebody sharing information about it just today, so it's out there, and make myself a note to put something down. I'll put stuff down in the description and send it off to you too. So
That's awesome.
um
Thank you.
yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think. When I first encountered Millay in any real sort of sense beyond just kind of seeing a poem here or there was in graduate school. And I feel like all the literary gossip of the women writing around that time period all sort of swirls in my head, so I can't remember whose is whose. Like Edna St. Vincent Millay, Mina Loy, and HD, and all of it is like kind of swirling in my head about who's who. Do you remember?
Well, but didn't they all kind of party together too, which doesn't help because a lot of the social lives kind of intermixed
Yes.
with the
Yeah.
modernists. Like there were parties. I would have liked to be at them. They sound really fun,
Yes.
but they
Yes.
also sound like their social lives were like very messy and very interesting, very dramatic social lives.
Yeah. I don't know if I would want to be too close. Maybe I'd want to be at the party, but I'd like to be brought there by a friend and not actually. I'd be like, so I could watch the goings on, but not actually be embroiled in them.
Yeah, be like a friendly acquaintance, like, oh, I get invited to stuff, but it's like you don't have to clean up their messes. You just go to the parties.
Yes. That was that was another part I was laughing about during your reading when you said the thing about the image of the poets. Um
I think some poets they really lean into, I don't know, a certain like image and it's and I like whatever they want to be is cool, you know. But there are some poets, it's like you're not doing the other poets favors. Um, you're just making us afraid of all of you, you know. And like in grad school, we had to pick, like it wasn't quite called like a secondary genre, but like we had our main genre that we did, a workshop in every semester, but we also had like we had to take a certain number of workshops in another genre. And I always went nonfiction because I was like afraid of poetry. And that was even like up into grad school, like afraid of poetry.
do
And I
you
got over it kind of. But I think that part of it was like I didn't know enough poetry to know that I liked poetry and wanted to like write poetry too. Like if you only get certain types of poetry, but like saying, oh, I don't like poetry, it's kind of like saying I don't like books. It's like, well, maybe you just like haven't found your genre yet, or you haven't discovered like the authors or the era or something that you like yet. So I just had to find that.
yeah, absolutely. Is there anybody writing right now who you feel connected with that you especially love their work?
So someone who is a contemporary poet whose work I really like for some of the same reasons I like Millay's, although he doesn't really do a lot with meter, is Matthew Olsman.
Okay.
I really like the accessibility of his poems, and he has a collection called Mezzanines. That's just such a great collection. And I would also say that it's a great collection of poetry for people who are like a little hesitant about poetry. Like if people are not sure they like it or they haven't read a whole bunch that they have liked, I feel like he's this really nice like gateway to poetry. I also like, and I'm going to call him contemporary because he is still with us and he's still very active on Facebook. And sometimes if you tag him, he will talk back to you. And that is Ted Kooser. So he And I think I just got lucky. I like brag that he's my Facebook friend, but I think he's just a really nice person and like accepted everyone's request until he hit 5,000, and I just happened to like squeak under the line. And I I tagged him once because I love his poem Abandoned Farmhouse. And it is another one that's like, that's kind of a horror poem, Ted. And it's this creepy, wonderful poem. And my students and I read it when we're talking about setting and like setting as mood and how to create this mood with this place. And I tagged him in a Facebook post about it once, and he commented, and I felt very cool for like a whole week.
That is such a great feeling, right? When the famous poets respond. And one thing I particularly like about him also is because was he a postal worker? Was that because I feel like he had some kind of day job for a long time while he wrote, and it wasn't sort of for many years until he was doing writing just as his main thing.
I'm not sure. I think I would believe it, because he's got so much that, again, it's just like real, regular life, but insightful.
Yeah.
He has another one, I think it's just called Tattoo, about an old man with a tattoo, and it's so good. It's so sad and like sweet, just talking about an old man who's at a yard sale and you can see his tattoo peeping out from under his shirt.
Nice. I will have to check out that poem.
Yeah.
Um, so speaking of, I can't remember what you said. I had a segue and then I lost it. But there was something that you said that made me think of advice and wisdom when you were talking about Ted Kooser. So this is my awkward segue into my next question for you,
Okay.
which is what advice do you have for a younger version of yourself? So maybe that grad school version, or maybe before, an earlier version of you.
Um, so I think that this would have to do with not getting distracted by certain expectations, like not getting distracted by what you think you should be writing, and like not being distracted what other people maybe think you should be writing, and just like you should be learning all the time. You should be working on your craft all the time. But I wish that I would have spent more time when I was younger working on the kinds of stories and poems that I wanted to write rather than the ones I thought I should be writing, because I always like tried to go literary and like always failed just a bit. It was like, oh, but Rebecca, like you put some humor in this. And then like that was like sometimes like a bad thing. Or like, oh, like you have some creepiness in this story. Like, is this a ghost story? And it's like, well, maybe what's wrong with a ghost story? I love ghost stories. So I think that I wish I would have learned about writing, but not given up for so long on what I wanted to write.
I feel you on that. I think think I maybe still need that advice sometimes.
It's hard. Like when you're a young writer, like your head is being pulled like in all of these directions, especially if you are in like a certain type of college program, even undergrad or with grad school, right? You're sort of like, this is what you should do, and this is what you should do, and this is what you should do. And it's like, but some of that is boring. But like you still feel like you should do it, so you like try to do it. You can't like quite make yourself be that boring. So then like you don't get it right. You're not getting that right, but you're also not doing what you want to do. So it's like you're just sort of failing on two counts. You have circles that do not overlap at all, you know?
Yeah, and it just becomes lose-lose for you
Yes.
when all you want to do is win, right?
Yes, because
Yeah.
it's like, who is this person like writing bad literary fiction? You know what I mean? Like just go write your vampire story or whatever, you know? Um, I don't know. It it's not that literary stuff is bad, it's just that there are so many people in the world of literature, right? Sort of caught up on like definitions and standards and like tiers and I don't know. I didn't find like my writing community until I was like 40, you know? And I think that if my younger self would not have been so distracted by expectations, I maybe could have found it earlier, you know, and like gotten good at my own kind of writing sooner. So
Yeah. How, do you have any image or advice on how one is able to accomplish that? To be able to learn about craft, kind of take what needs taken and leave what needs, leaving behind kind of thing. Like, what advice is there a way to do that, to be able to write what you want to write, but also learn from the other stuff?
this sounds kind of hokey or like kind of witchy, but I do think that you have to listen to your gut sometimes. Like if the people who you're trying to learn from are telling you that what you want to do is wrong or bad, like that's a mismatch, right? So when we when we are sort of made to feel that what we like is wrong, I think that that's a sign that we're maybe not looking in the right direction for some of those influences. The same literary lover, you know, will tell you all day that genre fiction is wrong and then talk about how great like Tolkien is. And it's like, hang on now. It's like literal sword and sorcery. Okay, it's full of actual swords and actual sorcery. But you're like telling me, right, that wizards are bad. I don't know. Come on. Like, I guess there's more room, I think, than people make it out to be in the whole landscape of books and reading and writing, you know, that if we have one type of everything, then it's a very boring place and there's only one type of book to read. And I don't know, just I would like to see, and it's better than it was even when I was in grad school, like 10, 15 years ago. It's better than it was, but there's still like that divide between like literary writing and then like genre sort of writing. And it would be nice if we just like that book Sneetches on the Beaches, you know, like if we just like could once and for all sort of like completely mix it up and just agree that good prose and good poetry can happen regardless of subject matter.
Yes.
And so much of the time, like it really just does come down to labels, right? Because again, like abandoned farmhouse, like super like respectable poem, but like also pretty horrific, that poem. Like the implications of what happened to the missing family, like that is spooky, you know? And then that poem, I shall go back again to the bleak shore. Like I'm just thinking like this is a sea witch in her sea witch hut on the beach and she's totally happy. You know, she's probably best friends with like a lobster or something. I don't know, you know, but it's like why do we sort of like give some writers like golf clap respect, you know, when their subject matter is not necessarily different from the people who were telling like don't write that, don't write about those things.
Yeah. Fuck yeah. That's
Yeah.
like I feel I I ruminate on those kind of things often. Because I think I had sort of similar experiences. I was told about my dissertation. I was using the Selkie myth as a metaphor for bipolar disorder in my family. and I was told that I needed to not have so many Selkie poems in it because I didn't want to be known as the Selkie poet. And so of course, being where I was kind of
Yep.
in my mind at the time, I was like, okay, obviously that's what I got to do. And so I, rearranged and took stuff out, and it's like, so not going to be known as a Selkie poet. So basically just not going to be known at all then, really, because I was, doing that bad impression of the kind of poet I was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it is hard to kind of dig yourself out from under all those layers and figure out what's under them, really.
Yeah. And I also like I learned so much in grad school, right? But one of the like so I learned all this stuff about writing and that was so wonderful, right? I also learned to be ashamed of what I liked. So like come on, that's not cool, And I like after so many years, you know, um I I have it feels like this weird growing pains, like you have to grow out of the shame that you learned in a program from people who thought it was not cool, to like what you liked. And so now I try very hard, like in my own, I teach creative writing classes, and um, I try very hard now at this point in my life to not be that teacher, you know, like this week in workshop, we had one story that was like pretty like literary in tone, in nature. And then we also got a cool superhero one, sort of like YA superhero. And the week before we got fantasy, and then we got like this cool sci-fi sort of murder mystery situation. And so like, and I have a student right now who's got this awesome idea for, it started off as a story, and his name is Michael. So hi, Michael, if you watch this. Michael has this awesome idea, and we were talking about it, and it's like epistolary. And I was like, I think that you maybe have like at least a novella, and so he's excited about this, and he's working on it, and he's going to turn in a chapter for workshop. And so he gets to start working in undergrad on a manuscript that he is excited about. And like, how awesome is that? And I'm sort of jealous of that in a weird way, right? Because nobody, when I was in undergrad, was like, oh yeah, you have an idea for like this cool genre thing, you should start working on it right now and I'll help you. No one ever said that to me.
Yeah. And it is it's amazing and wonderful that you can be the kind of professor that you needed and that you had wanted to have.
That is sort of my goal. Like a lot, it's just like, what did I need and I didn't get,
Mhm.
you know? And some of that was because I didn't know yet what I needed. But, I do think that college students now are so much more like articulate and self-aware than I was 20 something years ago.
Yeah.
Um, but but I just like, and I mean just like I just in like 2020 got back to sort of like doing what I wanted to do, which is a really long time to like wait to do the thing you want to do.
Yeah. Yes, it is. What do you think that Rebecca from back then would say to you now? She's, looking at you, she's in her time machine and seeing you now finally writing those things, but what kind of advice do you think that she would give to you?
I think part of her would have said, what's taken you so long? Like, why did you make us wait all that time? But um, of course, like self-consciousness and, trying to fit into the program and the program's aesthetic. And looking up to people, that you learned from. And so you kind of tried to you tried to like what they liked, you know. Um, so, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think that 20-year-old Rebecca would finally be proud of like 41-year-old Rebecca. But I think the 20-year-old Rebecca would have been frustrated with 30-year-old Rebecca.
Mm, that that makes sense. I can understand that for sure. They're so yeah. Now my brain just has the song Circle Game going through its head, going through my head. Um, 'Cause yeah, it takes a bit to get back to where we oh man, I mean, right? It's the hero's journey.
Yeah. And
We
it's
got to
like,
go through all the muck.
I feel like I'm not giving grad school enough credit because I did learn so much, but it was like now I can take all that good stuff I learned about just like good writing, whether it's poetry or prose, right? Just like good writing, good wording, and apply it to the subject matter that I love. And I'm like, man, I kind of wish I'd been doing that the whole time, right?
Yeah.
Like I didn't have to, I don't know, I didn't have to pretend to be somebody else. I just didn't know that I didn't have to in my 20s.
Yeah.
And then I think it kind of like I sort of stalled out in my 30s because like writing didn't really excite me in the way it used to because I'd kind of gotten so far away from what I wanted to do. And I dabbled here and there, it's like I never totally got out of it, but I didn't throw myself into it until about 4 years ago. Like throw myself back into it. And some buddies of mine from grad school, um, who were not snobby, who are fabulous and still fabulous. Um, Heather Freeze. Give Heather
Oh,
Freeze a shout out. Heather Freeze is one of them. Heather Freeze was like my best buddy in grad school. Our writing classes together, and Heather and I like we were always encouraging each other and like no judgment, just like what do you want to do? Let's do it. And Heather has now published one of the things she was working on in grad school, Fattest Girl on the Planet, and she's also now got her second one coming out. So right, like Heather is a testament. Like we should all just like follow Heather's example. Like she learned how to do what she wanted to do so well, and now has all these books coming out. So I want to be like Heather.
um, I I got chills when you mentioned Heather's name because also Heather is going to be her Meter Cute interview will go up in April.
Oh
So
yeah, Heather's wonderful. Everybody should be a Heather fan, a Heather Freeze fan. Buy her books.
agreed, agreed.
Yep. It was over lockdown. Heather uh, and a couple other friends, Kelly and Kima and Sarah, we got together and we started like a little writing. We started a workshop group. Hadn't workshopped since grad school. And we were like, let's have a workshop. And it was so fun. And it really helped me get back into writing. Like I actually like went and dug through, dusty folders until I found the stories from grad school that I wanted to revive, like the thesis stories that I thought still had something valuable in them. And it was only like two, maybe. It was only maybe two, but it was so fun to like take them out and then instead of like trying to like slip things in that I wanted to like totally make them what I wanted them to be.
Yeah.
So I wasn't like sneaking speculative elements past a literary workshop, which is what I think I did in grad school. I had one story about a dead dog who like may or may not have been reincarnated in this other lost dog. Doesn't matter. Long story. Dead dog, ghost, whatever. And I did a workshop. It was called a STERM workshop. It was like a special workshop that we had to like apply for and get into. It was like an extra workshop with like a special guest workshop leader. And the workshop leader got to my story and he looked at me and he goes, well, I don't know what to say about this one. And that was the end of it. That was his commentary for my story. And I remember wanting to like crawl under the table and just die, because it was like he didn't even think it was worth talking about. Like it wasn't even did he like it or not like it. It was like it was beneath commenting on.
Yeah. And I think that unfortunately that is not an uncommon experience for some folks from workshops. I mean, I've had similar experiences too, and it gives you just like an extra step or two that you have to try to climb and get over in terms of trying to become like come into your own as a writer. And
Mm-hmm.
I am so glad that you returned to writing, because I loved
Me
hearing your
too.
writing tonight, and I am so grateful and thankful that you came to chat with me.
Thank you for having me on. I've loved it.
What a fun interview that was. Also, I will say I used to put my computer up on yoga blocks to raise it up a little bit, and now I have this like monitor stand, but I think it's a little bit less stable because sometimes I get excited and I'll like move, and apparently I'm like moving the floor or something, and I'll like I can see just there, right? Like it wiggles a little. Adds excitement. It's like a what is it called? It's the opposite of steady cam. Shaky cam? Shaky cam. It's like my own little shaky cam. Makes me look like I have high-tech stuff and I don't. Uh, I really enjoyed talking to Rebecca tonight. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. I there's a lot of the advice that she was giving to herself is stuff that I need to hear too. It's stuff that I struggle with. If you've watched my videos specifically on the class playlist or the feminism playlist, where I read my writing and then I talk about it afterwards, I've struggled with trying to figure out where I fit into the writing world. Uh, and I think that a younger version of myself would be really confused, upset, uh, if she got a time machine and she was like, why do we not have a Pulitzer? What's the issue? And what I would say to her now would be, well, really, you tend to like things that are on the Booker list better than the Pulitzer list in terms of the writing that you like. So really, you should want to get on the Booker list, not Pulitzer. And then she'd be like, who gives a shit? Are you on either? I'm like, no. I'm having a real good time interviewing people and talking to other writers, and that's pretty good. That's a pretty good way to spend an evening. Now doing the edits on them, that's not a fun way to spend an evening, but can't have one without the other, I guess. Thanks for stopping by.